Morning, everyone. Call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. The panel today, sitting to my immediate left, is Mr. Maurice Therian. My name is Stu McPherson. I will be opening the hearing. We're pending the arrival of Mr. Harvey Diamond, who will take over and chair the hearing. He's just stuck in traffic. The assessor for today's hearing is Ms. Jennifer Martins, and the secretary is Ms. Katie Southern. We'll be hearing applications for the revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence that's provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicants may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave, and the process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private to make its decisions. You'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. And just as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. I should reiterate that with respect to the hearing process, it will actually be Mr. Diamond that will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant. At this point, I am going to call a recess to the hearings and await the arrival of Mr. Diamond.
First. Okay. You have to reopen it. Okay.
So, please state your name. Jennifer Martins. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Are you going to affirm or do you swear?
I'll swear.
Okay. Please state your name.
Art McCoubry.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll reopen our session of the Board of Revision hearing today. And the first matter we'll start with will be the property at 311 St. Mary's Road. And Ms. Martins, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Thank you. This is roll number 0608178400. The assessed value is $1,373,000. This property is classified as 20 with a liability of taxable. This is an apartment building built in 1948 with 22 suites. If we look on page 2, we see the income value summary. We have an average monthly rent of $580.40 per unit. There's a vacancy rate of 1.8%. with an expense rate of 53.48% and a cap rate of 5.1%. That gives us our $1,373,000. On page 3, there are some rent comparables ranging from $570 to $755 per suite. On page 4 and 5, we have the city's cap rate of evidence. The evidence given on page 5 is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparables specific to the subject property. On page 6, we have some Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And 7 and 8 are the income and expense mailers that were received by the department. And on page 9, we have 2 overhead pictures. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any questions of the assessor, you can ask them now.
Okay, I would like to focus on cap rates. In the material that you presented, it shows City of Winnipeg that a low-rise multifamily cap rates can range from a low of 4 to a high of 7.3, which I would certainly agree with. But we're looking at a very old, beat-up building in a good location, admittedly. Would you not expect the cap rate applicable to the subject property to be near the high end of that range rather than the low, really?
A lot of the factors have been taken into consideration. The information that the department has in regards to the condition of the property, as well as the location and the age, have been taken into consideration and applied to the cap rate that was driven by the model.
Okay, because I inspected the building and it's beat.
Okay, you're asking questions right now. You
Oh,
can
I'm sorry.
Certainly
Yeah.
no. If you have any
Sorry.
other questions, you absolutely
Yeah.
ask them.
Yeah.
You have it up to the evidence in a few minutes.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
First time here, so just.
Oh, no problem. Yeah.
But, yeah, most of our disagreement, of course, focuses on the cap rate. So if I could refer to the 4 that you specifically mentioned.
Okay.
One of the things that we all understand is that cap rates are extremely sensitive to the rents. And if you're under-rented, you're going to exhibit a low cap rate. And if you're over-rented, you're going to exhibit a higher cap rate. And I think that's just held to be true. We all understand that. So the first 2, like 191 Road, is really under-rented. And in my opinion, that's why it is exhibiting such a low cap rate. So it's showing 4.84, and it's a much better building than ours. And the income is $671 for a 1-bedroom, which is really low for such a higher quality building like that. So I think that 4.84 cap rate, if we look at ours vis-a-vis that one is clearly a better property.
Are you asking questions right now, or are you making an argument? I mean,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
no, just to get to the point, like,
Yeah.
I don't mind you asking questions,
Yeah.
and you'll certainly be given an opportunity to say whatever you have to say.
Right.
And if you don't have any other questions, you don't have to
Yeah.
right now.
Okay, I guess this is a sort of a long-winded question. Vis-a-vis the specific comparable cap rates here, do you think that reconciles with the subject property's cap rate of 5.1%?
These ones are not specific to the property. These are simply examples to show that the cap rate ranges that we have here, that these are some examples of sales that we have to show that our cap rates, that we have sales that fall within the cap rates. It's just an example for that. It's not, if you notice, they're the same cap rate properties on all of the briefs.
I did notice that.
Yeah, so it's not specific for the building, it's not specific for the building type. These ones, we looked at these just to show that, you know, yes, we do have cap rates that are lower than 5%, and that these are taken from actual sales, just as a small
Right.
example.
Okay. And I would just belabor this point one last time
Mhm.
about cap rates not being properties, not being, everybody gets the same cap rate. And that's evidenced by your
Yes.
4 to 7.3 range.
Yes.
So I just want you to say where within that 4 to 7.3 range, you think an old beat-up property like this one should fall.
Well, it also depends on size though too, right? So with this one, because it is on the smaller side, the condition that we have in our file, and maybe that is something that needs to be visited. If we get information from the owner that says that the condition of their property is not what we have on file, then that's up to the owner to contact us and let us know that we need to come and double check that. But for the condition that we have on file and the size and the area that it's in, this is an appropriate cap rate.
No more questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Terry, do you have any questions of the assessor?
Yes, please. I assume you have not inspected this property.
I have not inspected this.
Have you inspected any of these, so I don't have to ask the question again?
I have not had the opportunity to inspect any of the subject properties or any of the comparable properties.
Okay. Now obviously I was looking at the 1948 building with a cap of
Yes.
510. We'll see what the appellant has to say. I've looked at the mailer,
Yes,
and I don't know if this is all model driven?
yes it is.
Okay, now the mailer shows on the total income, obviously their expense side and NOI doesn't jive at all, but on the income side, we've got 143, the model's got 153, so the model seems to be higher than what the mailer says on page 7?
Yes, the model does appear to be higher than what the mailer says.
Yeah, even on page 8, the potential rent is also shown as 140, 234. So I was questioning that figure in relation to the mailer. Did you analyze the mailer law at all?
No, I did not.
You did not look at the mailer? Okay. And what's the cutoff, 48? I know you've always got the condition and the location and the year. What's the cutoff on the year on these to go to a higher cap rate? Do you know?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
45.
1945 is, then you go to what at 45? How much more?
What is the square footage on this one?
Well, I don't know that you can do that comparison, but I'm trying to get a bit of a range here.
At least half a point.
At least half a point? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's
Thank
all
you.
my questions.
I can tell you that Mr. Terry has asked all the questions that are pertinent, so there's nothing left for me to ask. Except one point I will point out though,
Yes.
and that is the multifamily index. I see that the 20th percentile is at 490, and the 80th is at 530, which is only 40 basis points higher. So you think that 1945 though would then go to at least 540 though, as you indicated, Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we've got enough of the questions, so now you can give your evidence.
Okay, you know, I looked at the city's figures and really the only difference, the only significant difference comes down to cap rate. You know, we essentially agree with the gross income, the net income, the expense ratios, we're almost in complete
What
agreement.
page is that, sir?
That's page 9
Because you're
on my
jumping to
material.
that right away, so.
Yeah.
We
Well,
gotta
there's-
find it.
Page 9 on mine.
I don't know if that's how you wanna proceed, because you got the stack here, so.
Yeah,
I'm
page.
just asking.
We'll start with page 9, that's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine?
because
Okay.
I think it's, page 9 focuses on the only thing we're in disagreement on, which essentially
Okay.
is coming down to the cap rate on this one.
Okay,
And again, this building is beat up, it's got an old boiler that's as old as the building that's coming up. It's almost, it's absolutely an entry-level apartment for this good neighborhood. And it's getting to the point now where it's not far from redevelopment, to be honest with you. It's been neglected, it's beat up, and I suspect the owners are reluctant to put a ton of money into it because it's at the end of its economic life cycle. So I think it deserves the highest cap rate that you would find in that neighborhood. It's, if you're capping into perpetuity, I think perpetuity for this property, you're looking at about 10 years before somebody's gonna knock it down and put something better up. So 5.1% cap rate, that this in no way reconciles with what I've ever seen in the marketplace as of April 1st, 2018. So I would just offer that that's where our difference of opinion lies, and I think I have a reasonable position that that cap rate should be much higher.
I see you have quite a bit of information in your,
Yeah.
do you want to refer to any of the buildings that you've stipulated that substantiate where your position is on cap rate?
Yeah, I do, I did table a lot of cap rates, and they are from the files of B.W. Ferguson. So we have a template that we use, and what we often will do is we'll look at the last 3 years' repairs and maintenance. And like a prospective buyer would do, especially on an older building like this, he would look at the last 3 years of R&M and see what he can expect reasonably over the following number of years. So if you look at R&M, it has ranged from 11.8 to 52.3. We normalize that at $24,200, which is only $1,100 per suite, which is really reasonable for an old building like this. So I think the NOI which we've arrived at is very reasonable, and if we refer to the cap rates, the ones that I've scheduled, the first one at 512 Balmoral is showing.
Page?
I'm sorry, this is page 7 on my report.
Page 7, okay.
It's showing a cap rate of 6.75%. And that, that's to me an inferior location, and I understand that our cap rate should be beneath that one. The next one on Rogue Street at 4.84 is seriously under-rented, and I think that's a little bit of an anomaly, that one. 210 St. Mary's Road, which is bang on, location-wise. It's been reconstructed essentially the same way ours has. It's showing 6.26%. So again, to contrast that with the 5.1% of the city, I think it's very, very much too low. And 925 Dugas Avenue, another one that I've appraised myself, that building was brand new. I mean, you would expect it to exhibit a much lower cap rate, and it was 5.38. So I think, I think that 5.1% should be just conceded that that's too low. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. If you have any questions of the applicant, you can ask them now, Ms. Martins.
No, I don't, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Terry, do you have any
Yeah, well,
questions?
just to confirm stuff here.
Yep.
So the NOI is not really a problem as far as you're concerned. To confirm, on page 7, you're at 68,070 on the NOI. The city's at 69,998. So you're
Yeah.
okay with the city's?
Well, I
think
believe
it's
mine
close.
is correct, but
Okay.
I don't think the difference is so small. I didn't want to focus my attention on
Okay.
$1,000.
So on page 8, you've used your NOI and you gave us 2 choices here, I guess, 5.5 and 5 3/4.
Well,
What was your idea there?
Well, I guess what I'm doing here is I'm taking the letter of the, this is how we present it to our clients when they're choosing to buy a property. We understand that cap rates are imprecise. So we present this, that in our opinion, the cap rate on this property falls between 5.5 and 5 3/4. So we picked the number in there that ended up with a cap rate of 5.62. But essentially, we think that that's where the cap rate lies. We never, in actual practice on market value appraisals, tell somebody the cap rate is 5.62 because they're just too imprecise. So that was the range that we feel the subject should fall within, and then we just went to the midpoint of that range, which we thought was
Oh, I see.
reasonable.
I had missed that last line here. So I see you're looking for 1,211,000.
Yes.
Okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and again, I think the questions have been exhausted. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next property on our list is 45 Clayton Drive, and when you're ready, again, you can proceed, Ms. Martins.
The roll number is 0800-274-7500. The assessed value is $3,549,000. This is classified at 20 with the liability status as taxable. This is an apartment building built in 1965 with 42 suites. If you look on page 2, we have the income value summary. With 13 one-bedroom apartments and 24 two-bedroom apartments with an average monthly rent per unit at $823.59. A vacancy rate of 2.6, an expense rate at 53.48, and a cap rate at 5.3. That's how we get to our estimated market value of $3,549,000. We have some rental comparables on page 3, ranging from $711 to $922. Page 4 and 5 is the cap rate evidence. Page 6 is the municipal act excerpts. And then we have some income information. And on the back is 2 overhead pictures of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, again, on this, you can ask the assessor now.
Yes, does your model, your income and expense budget allow for any, this specific one include any extraordinary expenses? Or is this just modeled after a generic type property of this size, age?
This is modeled after a generic property of this size and age. With extraordinary expenses, most of those would have some sort of amortization on them so that it would balance out.
Okay, thank you, that's the only question I have.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions?
I'm just trying to compare these figures, I always do. Did you, on page 7, I see the EGI is 424. You're at 404, this is all model driven.
This is all model driven.
Yeah, did you analyze any of this to compare with what's going on in respect to your model?
No, I did not. It looked not too far apart.
No, except the NOI is quite different. So.
The NOI is quite
So
different.
I was wondering if there was anything that should have been removed from the expenses, that's all. So you did not analyze it?
No, and
Okay.
it's tough when you get a number like that for all of the maintenance to know if that's general maintenance or if there's capital costs instead of that.
Okay, that's all, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I'm looking at this, and I'm just comparing it to the last property we just dealt with, which was an older building, and the city model had described capitalization rate to that at 5.1. And this is a newer property, and the city capitalization rate on this one is 5.3. I'm just wondering how the model is able to, on a newer building, ascribe a higher cap rate than on an older building that we just dealt with.
It could be in regards to quality that's put on the buildings or size.
Could be,
impact.
so you don't know how that happened.
No,
It's all modeling.
I didn't go swimming through the model and.
Yeah, the model, so this is a mystery to us, that's why I asked the question.
It is, but there are a lot of factors that do influence. It's not just, like, we don't have a shopping list where we say, okay, this is the year and this is
No,
the soda, this is.
I agree, I understand that, I'm just
Yeah.
a little bit perplexed, because it appears to me that, on the basis of what I see, that this property should have a lower cap rate than one we just dealt with, not a higher one.
It's possible that the previous property had at some point been marked up as a better condition than it is, and
Yeah.
that would have a high influence on it.
Okay, you answered as best you can, thank you. I've got no further questions, so you can proceed your.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'm just going to focus my remarks on areas where we have a difference of opinion. And essentially, that comes down to a substantial difference in the vacancy rate. So in the city's model,
What page, sir?
let me see, pardon me. I think it might be easiest if we go to page 8 in my document where I have a comparison directly between my numbers and the city's numbers.
Okay.
So on page 8, The city has used 2.6% and I've used 5%. So the 2.6% I would concede is typical for a suburban block in this location, but on this particular one, the poor fellow has a bedbug problem that started in 2006 and has persisted ever since. And you can go online with the bedbug registry and there's all sorts of commentary about, don't live in this place, it's full of bedbugs. It has been an absolute disaster for this guy. And to talk about what a disaster it's been, I'm going to refer you to the next page, on page 9, where I've broken down in category the last 3 years of R&M for 15, 16, and 17. And most of it's pretty typical of a property like this, till you get to the very last line, pest control. So in the past 3 years, this gentleman has spent a total of $169,000 on pest control, and he hasn't beat it since. So he's constantly plugging holes, battling with these bed bugs. It's just been terrible. And it's our position that this has affected the vacancy allowance, and it affects the R&M. And literally, if you look at our two numbers, the difference is essentially the cost of pest control. If I could take that pest control out, I'd be in very close agreement with the city's position. And I just want to say that the pest control won't last forever. I mean, eventually he'll get this under control, and if we revisit this assessment, next assessment or the assessment after that, it might be that he's got 0 for pest control. But at least for now, this is costing this guy an average of almost $37,000 a year to try to keep this place up and running and keep the pests, the bed bugs under control. So I think it's an absolutely indispensable expense that he has to spend. And again, I know in appraisals we're normally capitalizing these things into perpetuity. And if that was the case, you could make an argument, well, this isn't going to last forever. But it is going to last for the next assessment cycle. And at that point, if he submits, I beat the problem, I got no pest control bills to submit, then, he might go up, depending on the circumstance. But for now, this guy's got a real disaster on his hand, full of bed bugs. So I think we need to make an allowance for this extraordinary expense that's unavoidable at this point. So that's the crux of the difference between our number and theirs. And, to revisit the cap rates again, I think your cap rates are low, so there is a little bit of that here as well. And I think you could argue that, you want to take a lot of the risk out of the property when you create your NOI, but cap rates are still an investor looking at this property and looking at this as a bed bug infested property with 1/3 of the suites in the basement and electric heat. He's not even thinking about a 5.3% cap rate. That would not cross his mind. The expectations of somebody investing in that building were that they are taking a bigger risk and they're getting a better rate of return. So I submit that the cap rate that we're suggesting, 5.62, is in itself quite conservative and reasonable. And that's it for all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant?
No, thank you.
Mr. Terry?
I asked a question on the inspection, these properties. Did you inspect them all?
I did, everyone.
Okay. Yeah, that's about $880 per suite for your pest control.
Yeah, and it's, I actually went online and read some of the material on there. And it's a really tough problem to beat. I mean, you're constantly fumigating and then patching every little hole and trying to keep it from moving sideways, trying to keep it from moving upwards. It's just so frustrating for this individual.
So that problem's been existing since 2006?
The earliest, pardon me, let me just refer to that. I'm going from memory.
Well, I think
it was
you
quite,
mentioned that, that's
yeah.
why
pardon me, it was 2012. So I was thinking maybe 6 years instead of.
Okay, so
Yeah.
2012 till now.
Till now.
What problem has existed?
Yeah, and it's actually, if you look at my page 9, last year the pest control was 45.5. So
Yeah, I saw
it's actually getting worse. So, I mean, eventually you'll get it under control, but not in this assessment cycle up here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So basically, when somebody buys a building and looks at the cap rate,
Yeah.
they're looking at long-term investment potential, not the short-term. You
Yeah,
agree with that?
I think the two biggest things when we discuss cap
Let's answer the question.
Oh, no,
Okay.
they're looking at two things. They're looking at how quick the rent can grow. So if it's under rented, great, I'm gonna get in low, or capital gain at the end. So
But they're looking at
those are the
long-term,
two
though.
things. Long-term,
Not
absolutely.
necessarily the existing circumstances.
Everybody's different, but usually a
Yeah.
10-year horizon, they're looking in those
And
things.
you indicated that you thought that the city, if they allowed a 5% cap rate, not a 5% cap rate, I'm sorry, 5% vacancy factor,
Yeah.
that would probably make things more in line with your valuations are at.
Yeah, I think that would make things more in line with the actual experience of this property
Okay.
than just the CMHC average.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Martins, the next part we're gonna deal with is 10 Valhalla Drive.
Oh, that's you, Brett.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just swear you in. Do you want to swear? Okay.
Yes, that's
So
fine.
please state your name.
Brett Ferguson?
Do you swear that the evidence you represent is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much.
Morning.
Mr. Martins, when you're ready, you can take us through your material.
This is roll number 040019300000. The assessed value is $15,610,000. Its classification is 20, residential 2. Liability status is taxable. This is an apartment building built in 1968 with 140 suites. There are 125 indoor parking spots and 25 outdoor parking spots. On page 2, there's 94 one-bedroom, 47 two-bedroom, with an average monthly rent of $990.01. There's a vacancy of 2.6%, expense rate at 49.29%, and a cap at 5.3%, giving us the $15,610,000. On page 3, we have some rental comparables, ranging from $908 to $1,101. On page 4 and 5, we have the cap rate presentation. On page 6, there are the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 7 and 8 is the income information that was submitted to the department. And on page 9, we have an overhead picture of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Ferguson?
Just a couple.
Go ahead and ask them.
I guess, first of all, did you visit the property? Have you walked through it?
No, I have not.
Okay. You've shown the profit and loss statement, but you haven't included the rent roll that my client responded to the mailer with. Was there a reason for the exclusion?
I brought it with me if there were questions about it, but I don't include anything with all of the tenant names in
Okay, no, that's
in my
fair.
documentation for
Yeah,
public
but
record.
you've got it with you.
I have it with me.
The income and expense statement, along with the rent roll, were those taken into consideration in the establishment of the income? Because I think, as you'll see, and I think our major problem is the
Well,
income. Yes, no, I
certainly
realize
with you.
that.
No, the income is entered in for our information for use as comparables, but the income is not directly placed on the individual properties.
So the income side of your analysis is model-driven,
Yes.
is that fair to say?
Yes.
Doesn't really consider the actual rents that are in place?
Exactly.
Okay, that's all I have for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, do you have any questions?
Well, I'll see what the appellant has to say on that. Your NOI though, you're at 49.29% on expenses?
Yes.
So we'll have to see what the rates they are using. And your cap is at 5.3.
Yes.
So obviously, that's a 1968 building? So that's the same rate we used on the last one, I guess, basically?
Yes.
Okay, that's all. Oh, maybe, is that a masonry held, masonry building walls? Okay. Thanks very much. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I've got no questions. We'll let Mr. Ferguson proceed with this, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sure. I'll just walk you briefly through my brief. Starting on page 1, there's a table, subject property details. It's a medium-rise masonry building, elevated. Was a good quality building in its day, and it's still in decent condition. My clients own a portfolio of apartment blocks, longtime family holdings, as well as they've developed, they entered the assisted living business in about 2003. I think they built their first one, and now they have a portfolio of 6 assisted living projects. So they are experienced operators of multifamily and large-scale buildings. And just for the, I guess the assessor and the panel's information, I reviewed all the assessments of their portfolio when the 2020 numbers came out. This was the only apartment block that I recommended that they appeal. I felt by and large the city's assessed values were fair. But I'll get into it shortly on why this one we decided to appeal, because there is an error on the city's part in this. 1968 vintage, as I said, it was good quality. It still remains a decent quality building, but what the challenge is with the explosion in multifamily construction in Winnipeg in recent years, with average rents approaching $1,000, and that's average, so obviously there's rents above that. They really faced the challenge in losing tenants. You know, if you're paying $1,000 in a building built in 1968, something brand new in a suburban neighborhood looks very appealing. So they've had a real challenge in retaining their tenants. They've had a lot of turnover. So that was one of the reasons I asked the assessor if she actually looked at the rent roll. Because if you look through the rent roll, you'll see so many 2018 deals struck. You can just see all the new tenants coming in. So instead of the 2.6% vacancy rate that the city has prescribed, they're running at about 5.5% actual vacancy and turnover in this building. And it's primarily, it's nothing the matter with the building, it's just getting old. So it's a challenge maintaining the tenancies. So on the bottom of page 1 in the blue, that's really the spread in our valuation estimates. I suggest the value should be $13,860,000, and the city's at $15,610,000. So now I'll walk you through how I've arrived at my number. Page 2, there's an aerial shot of the building, 3 rooms on the building. And then on page 3, this is how I've derived the potential income for the building. You can see the unit breakdown in a little table in the middle of the page. There's actually 141 suites. There's 1 bachelor unit that I don't think the city's accounted for in their numbers. So their average rents, bachelor, there's only 1 unit, so the average is the actual $798. The average rent for the 1 bedroom is $830, and for the 2 bedroom is $1067. Now I don't show the calculation, but I'd welcome you to do it. If you add up all of their actual rents, divide by the number of units, their average overall rent is $915. So,
Save us the time to work it out.
well, I just, if you note my numbers, it'll lucky me to calculate, and you got the rent roll. But on the assessor's submission, page 3, there's five comparable buildings and 5 comparable rents presented. If you go down to the third last line, you see the average monthly rent per unit. They show the subject as $990. Well, that's wrong. It's $915 per month average overall rent. And I understand that's their model rents. That's not the actual, so that's why it's an error. But if I go across, I see $908 for number 1, and I see $939 for number 4. So the subject at $915 falls towards that bottom end of the range. I don't think there'd be any dispute there. But it's within the, it's within the realm of realism, I guess, in terms of what the assessor has presented. So I've based my analysis on the actual rents, not presumed or modeled rents. It's on the actual rents in place. And that's based on the rent roll of April 1 of 2018, the effective date of appraisal or assessment reference here. Put a table on the bottom of page 3. I mean, that's just the standard CMHC market rents. I don't think we need to get into that. And then on page 4, there's just one comment on the vacancy loss. The CMHC reported at the end of 2017, 2.8% for overall Winnipeg and 2.5% for East Kildonan zone. So I think that's what the, no, you've used 2.6. So it doesn't match the CMHC number, but it's darn close. And as I said earlier, if you look at the actual potential revenue based on the 2017 year-end statement versus what was collected in rent, the vacancy was about 5.5, 5.6%. So on page 4, this shows a comparison between my income calculation. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay,
No.
I saw you holding up your
No.
pen like that.
Oh, sorry, no, not,
Okay.
It's your chance.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a comparison between my income calculation and the city's. So you can see the rental income, the actual collected rents, $1,446,470. They have rental discounts in place. And I don't want to preempt the assessor's question, but I questioned the property manager on what the rental discounts represented. And I got an email back. These are reductions from the registered rent with the RTB. These are offered to long-term, in parenthesis, good residents of 10 plus years. Pay on time and not a problem. These residents have also recently had the security deposits returned along with $100 as a thank you for being good residents. So basically, what I read from that is because of their challenge in retaining tenants, they want to reward the tenants that have been there for a long time, so they're giving them $50 discounts on their rent in hopes of retaining them going forward. So that's what the rental discounts represent in the income statement. And I think it's pretty common practice amongst apartment operators to have a rent registered with the RTB at a certain number, and then have it discounted in the actual what's collected. It maintains their ability to keep up with the market.
Okay, we understand that.
Okay, that's fine. Parking revenue is factored in based on their actuals, as well as additional income, which would represent laundry income. So the gross potential income based on actuals from 2017 is estimated at $1,444,478, and that includes the vacancy loss. So they report their revenue numbers as a gross number, the actual collected, that includes the vacancy. So I haven't applied a vacancy allowance to that number calculated, whereas the city, they state their gross potential of 1.675 and then take off their 2.6 vacancy allowance. So the bottom number, the effective gross income number there, you can see my number of 1,444,478 falls significantly below theirs of 1,631,544. That's the difference in the assessed value between what I say it should be and what it actually is. Because we'll go to the next page. Next page is the operating expenses. So we've established there's a variance on the income side. Let's look at the expense side. So page 5 represents what information was returned to the city. And my client sends in their financial statement and sends in their rent roll. So if I take you to page 6, same table except we've added the expense side at the bottom. So the income calculation is up at the top. And what you can see is if you look at it in terms of an operating expense ratio, based on the actual expenses compared to the actual rents, the ratio is 49.13%. The city's at 49.29%, almost negligible difference, very, very close. But they're estimating their expenses based on the inflated income amount. So that there follows through to the NOI of my NOI calculation of 734,777. The city estimates it at 827,356 based on their model. I haven't taken issue with the cap rate. I think it's a reasonable cap rate. We could put it over, a couple of points here and there, but I think it's fair. So running through with the city's cap rate, we get our final estimates of value. And that's the variance that I pointed to earlier.
Thank you.
That would be my submission.
Thank you very much. Ms. Martins, any questions?
I don't have questions, but I do have one item of rebuttal.
And we'll let you put that in after we ask questions then?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chair, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Now, you mentioned that your income for 1st of April 2018, using the year end, what has been the history of those rents a couple of years before? I'm trying to get a bit of a picture of an average coming to that period. Would you know, like for?
The rents in this building, basically, because they're registered with the residential tenancies branch, my client keeps up with the annual increases allowed. So you would see a general take up in the rents every year based on whatever's allowed by RTP.
And the other question is on your vacancy. Now, you got 5.6. What's been the history of vacancy in that building going back 3-4 years? We usually look at an average, and that's why I'm asking that question specifically.
Yeah, I don't have the information in front of you, but my understanding, because I have reviewed this building every assessment cycle for my clients, and it's generally consistent. They've had this vacancy challenge, not just this building, many buildings like it. An average vacancy rate is exactly it. It's an average vacancy rate for the market. Some exceed it, some are lower. But ever since the sort of the construction boom in multifamily construction started in Winnipeg, say 5 to 7 years ago, you really saw a ramp up in multifamily starts in suburban areas. They've had this challenge of loss of tenants.
So
I
are
won't say
you?
loss of tenants, I'll say turnover in tenants.
Yeah, so are you telling us then that because I know we don't have the data here, are you telling us that the vacancy over the last 4 or 5 years has been around 5%?
I believe so. Now, that's vacancy loss. That's lost revenue. So it may not be 5.6% at any particular point in time, but with turnover and lost months and having to lease a unit, that's what it's accounted to.
Okay, and the general condition of the building is pretty good.
It's not bad.
It's not
Yeah.
bad. Yeah. Okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, so basically what you're saying then is that with the massive construction of new residential buildings in the city, there's more doors chasing fewer tenants, and therefore I would assume then that a building that has lower rents would probably have a lower vacancy factor because tenants are discerning and they're going to be attracted to a place where they get the best bang for their buck.
Yeah, I mean, building with low rents, like what Mr. McCoubry was just presenting, you're not, the owner of those buildings aren't losing tenants to brand-new apartment buildings where it might be a $1,200 or $1,300 rent. Here, you are losing tenants to those buildings, because it's an option. Should we stay here when our lease is up with a 1968 building with, shag carpet or linoleum tile, or should we move to the brand-new Broad Street construction? It's wood frame construction, but it's brand new, and it looks flashy.
So basically, I guess then a property owner, like your owner of this building, would has a choice then. They could probably bump up or decrease the vacancy factor by lowering the rent, which I guess they're looking to do because rent controls, and they don't really want to set it at a lower parameter for future increases.
Well, in essence, that's what they're doing
Yeah.
by offering the discounts.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they did lower their rent, they're gonna get a lower NOI. And so even if everything else remained the same with lower cap rate, they're still gonna have less income, and you'd still be sitting in that chair probably.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can I say something about?
Again.
Oh, yeah, you've got something to tell us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The tenant inducements and leasing incentives fall under the non-recoverable expenses. And the inclusion of these non-recoverable expenses is contrary to municipal board case law. There's a long-standing history of municipal board orders stating that these items should not be treated as expenses. Below are three municipal board orders indicating this. First one is order number A97280. It's on page 3 and 4. This question has been dealt with by the board in several recent orders, in particular in municipal board order number A94196, dealing with the Richardson building, where it was indicated considerable evidence was heard concerning the effect on value of tenant inducements. The respondent ultimately abandoned the position that value should be reduced to reflect tenant inducements. And municipal board order number A97065, the board is satisfied that it is not proper to reduce value to reflect tenant inducements. The board reiterates that tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purpose of calculating market value. And if we go just a little bit down, order number A99026. The board reiterates that tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purpose of calculating market value. It has not been the practice of the board to allow these expenses, and the board is satisfied that these items should not be treated as expenses. And if we turn it over on the next page, order number A07087. The rent used by Mr. DuPont for the restaurant was based on the deduction of an amount for free rent. The board has consistently taken the position that tenant inducements, including free rent, do not reflect the market and will be given no weight. And we go under the relevant facts. These items are entrenched in Manitoba case law as being irrelevant in the valuation of commercial properties. So I understand the position of
Okay.
putting in the
We'll
tenant
we'll
inducements.
be asked questions on this, but thank you for an excellent presentation. And
Thank you.
We'll be asking some questions on it, and you get the first opportunity to do so.
Yeah, that's great. I find it highly inappropriate. I mean, I do a lot of litigation work, and to get a rebuttal thrown at you during the hearing is,
It's normal.
usually it's provided in advance, so at least
Yeah.
you have a chance to read the materials. I'm not gonna try and
No,
digest it.
I can tell you it's normal, and I think as board members, myself and Mr. Turner are also really aware of these factors, but if you have questions, you can ask them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact of the inappropriateness or the appropriateness, I'd say you've taken this totally out of context, because what you're talking about, what Mr. DuPont was talking about here, and you said it was a restaurant, is a commercial property where there's leasing commissions, tenant inducements built into the rental rate. TI is tenant improvement allowance. It's for build-out of a restaurant or commercial property. This isn't applicable to an apartment block. So that would be,
Well, you're
do
responding.
you
because I think-
agree?
I think what you've done is you haven't really asked a question, but you've indicated your position.
There
on
was
it.
my question. Do you agree with that?
And that's fine. Mr. Chair, do you have any questions of the assessor?
Well, that was, you gotta let him do his work first, he's not done.
Oh, he's not done?
No, I'm done.
I thought he was.
Oh, do you agree with that, you got an answer?
No.
Oh.
No, I think you indicated a position, which we, well, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I don't think I have, I think they're different though, but,
Okay, I have a question.
Yes,
So let's suppose that I agree with you entirely,
okay.
and all these inducements are not, shouldn't be allowed because the municipal board's already said that. But we look at the building as a whole, we use the city's model,
Mhm.
except that we agree that this building's got a 5.6% vacancy factor, and we build it into your model. I think the municipal board would probably say that that is not a bad way of handling this, wouldn't you?
No, I would agree, but the thing is that when we're doing, rents are reported, and we have different rents that are reported on the income and expense mailer, then we're using different rents in for the appeal. We also brush against the issue of providing inconsistent information. So when we are coming up with our model, and we have, these are the reported rents, but these are the actual rents, it does run us the problem of, we're looking at
No,
the income expense, and we're getting to.
I understand all
Yeah.
that, but at the same time, this applicant has made an application
Mhm.
on the basis of this building being some of an anomaly from the model.
Yes.
And that's why they're here. If it was the model, they wouldn't be here.
Yes.
And we're trying to deal with it as best we can and be fair. So I'm basically saying that I agree, the municipal board has ruled that
Yes.
tenant inducements are not things that should be considered.
Yes,
But I'm saying in this situation, this building itself, if it has a 5.6% vacancy factor, that is something that we can look at.
absolutely, and I think that is not included in the rebuttal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson, anything else that you want to say?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, are you headed back to the office? I got a couple more to do.
Just for entertainment.
But now at least you have a copy of the rebuttal.
Okay. So our next property is 1075 Henderson Highway. And when you're ready, Ms. Marks, you can proceed.
This is roll number 0203160210. The assessed value is $3,133,000. This is an apartment, its classification is 20 and liability status is taxable. This was built in 1969 with 29 suites. Oh, and 29 outdoor parking spots. On page 2, we have the income value summary. It looks like there are 23 one-bedroom apartments and 6 two-bedroom apartments. The average monthly rent per unit is $890.75. We've applied a 2.6% vacancy rate and a 45% expense rate with a 5.3 capitalization rate. On page 3, we have some comparable rents, and they range from $842 to $897, sorry, $899. We have 2 pages of cap rate evidence, the Municipal Assessment Act excerpt, and then on page 7 and 8, we have the income and expense information, and on page 9, we have 2 overhead views of the property. You can see this one is on the corner of McLeod and Henderson. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any questions, you can ask them now, sir.
Oh, just confirming that you didn't have an opportunity to inspect the building.
I did not have that.
And the numbers are based on a model
It's
rather
all
than
true.
actual. No, no other questions, thank you.
Mr. Terry, do you have any questions?
Well, I'm just looking, again, as usual, I look at the income statement, which is page 7, and it looks like on the income side, pretty close. Model says 310, and you're at, this is 306. Well, I'm looking at the total income.
Yeah.
Including parking is 306. Okay, I think I have no questions. 5.3, that's a masonry construction, okay. What I found interesting is the potential rent on page 8 is 303, but they can pull in a little more, 306.
Yeah, I noticed
found
that at the time.
I found that pretty interesting.
Well, the potential rent doesn't include any parking or anything.
Parking.
Does it? Well, it may still be more. Okay, well, okay, it's pretty close, okay. I'm done, I don't know.
Just 1 second.
He's got to look at this.
Okay, I see that their expenses on the mill is higher, but they have things that shouldn't be in there, like depreciation.
That's right.
Okay, we'll let Mr., the applicant take us through his material, we'll see where we're at.
Well, again, this is one of those where there's little difference of opinion. On the income side, it looks like we've both used the income and expense submissions by the property owner. So if we could just jump to page 12 of my report where we have the comparison between
Okay.
my figures and the property assessment figures. The first 3 rows are essentially in complete agreement. Actually slightly strange in that my effective gross income is $1,000 or so higher. So the difference again lies in the expense side of the equation. And if I could bring you forward to the following page, anytime we're looking at expenses, there are usually a couple of areas where we don't use actual, we normalize. So those, in the subject instance, I've looked at the 3 parts of the expense budget which were normalized. So property management, professional fees, and repairs and maintenance. Referring to property management, you see that there's just a very strange number for 2017. 2015 was $7,600, 2016 was $5,400, and then in 17 they have $72,600, which I don't understand where that came from, but it doesn't matter. We normalize that at 5% of effective gross income, which I think is industry standard. So that number has been normalized. I don't think that's a disputable number. The professional fees is the second thing we normalized. In 15 and 16, there was no expense for professional fees. And then in 17, there was a $12,000 expense. So we normalized that at $3,500, which is fairly typical professional fees for a building of this size. You usually get an audited financial statement, and there's some professional fees involved in running it. And the third one that was normalized was repairs and maintenance. And in 2015, they were $79,500. 2016, they were $56,900, and in 2017, they were $54,000. So we have normalized those on what is essentially the 3-year average. The 3-year average on R&M is $63,500. We normalized it at $60,000. And if I can just go back to page 10 in my report and the calculation of net operating income, you can see the 3 shaded areas. I don't know if that shows up on your copies. The 3 areas that were normalized. Every other line item is actual, and every other line item is actual and reconciles with our typical experience of blocks like this. So we used the actual numbers, except for the 3 instances shaded in gray that we're discussing now. So professional fees fine, management fine. So the R&M is 60,000, is $2,500 per suite, which is high. But there's a reason why it's high, and I think it's reasonable for it to be high because this building has gotten to the part of its life cycle where every year this owner is trying to remodel 2 suites and bring them up to standard. So in addition to your normal maintenance on the property, he's doing 2 suite remodels at say $30,000 to bring those suites up, and he's raising the rents on those. So in some respects, it's almost self-adjusting. He spends more on R&M and he raises his income. So he's got a very high R&M as he brings this property up into a better quality property with higher rents. So to me, I absolutely accept 60,000 as a reasonable R&M for a property in this part of its life cycle, and that over the course of the next 15 years, he's going to bring this property up to a higher standard with much higher rents. And I think it's $2,500 per suite. When you look at it pro rata like that, it sounds high, but really it is normal maintenance plus improving the building, improving the rents, and again, it's almost self-adjusting that everything's going up. The expenses have went up and they've dragged the income up with it, and it's an absolutely, in our view, a legitimate expense and investment into the property. And that's, to me, the only perhaps debatable point in the entire proposal, or the entire appraisal here, is that R&M. And again, it is based on actual, not modeled. If you look at his last 3 years of R&M, almost 80, almost 57, almost 54, normalized at 60, and absolutely, I think, reasonable position.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just one. So the owner's efforts to do 2 suites a year, is that like kind of his way of amortizing the additional expense of improving the property and bringing it up to a higher standard?
Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way, that if he can expend $60,000 on R&M each and every year, that's essentially doing that, yes.
Okay.
But each and every year, he'll need to spend $60,000.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant, Mr. Terry?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I've got the same problem. I have no problem with the 5% on the property management, which is fine. But $2,500, as you mentioned, is high.
Yeah.
Now, you say 2 suites per year are done. What is being done to those suites? Because, you know, there's a difference between
Yeah.
the capital expense and the maintenance, and this is where we have to be careful that we're not.
Yeah,
I understand all your arguments you're
Yeah.
giving, but
he's-
that's a concern, I guess, and I'd like you to address that.
You know, I can't give you a budget line, but if I can refer you to page 5 in my material, I think you can see, for instance, suite number 304, which is, he was able to schedule that one higher, or pardon me, a better one is suite number 110, which is a 2-bedroom unit that he's now getting $1,015 for, versus some of the 2-bedroom units he's getting $803, or pardon me, let me see here, $878. So you can see that this one, he's been able to raise the rent $150 on here's one remodeled suite. So that's a significant increase.
But could you answer me on what is being done in those suites?
Kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, paint, the ones that I saw probably 6 or 7 suites in the entire building during my inspection. And of those, 1 or 2 were updated, and there are variations of upgrades. So you're always going to be governed by how much more rent you think you can get. So for him to bump the rents $150 on that one, that's essentially, if you work that through at an expense ratio and cap that, that's 150, that's 1,800 a year, 900 divided by 5. That's like a $20,000 expenditure.
Would there be marble counters and stuff like that?
No, this is a mid-grade apartment, so the one I saw had white laminate counter, or white laminate cabinets, white counters, redone bathrooms, it was nice. But he's just getting started. I mean, you would categorize this building as, most of them average at best, and it's time to improve them, and that's his opportunity to do so. And he started to do it. I mean, he's been expending, again, $63,000 a year on average on expenses. And he's putting that right back into the building and bumping the rents up. And I know I've said this before, but it's almost, to me, it's an admirable thing that he's doing, and it's increasing the value of the property, and of course increasing its assessed value.
So, but at the same time, you're not sticking to the same cap rate, because as you improve the building, obviously, investors are gonna be more interested.
Yes.
And the cap rate
Yeah.
will be compressed to some extent.
At some
So-
point,
So
yeah.
what you're asking for 552 here,
Yeah.
so you're, I
Early
don't call
days,
it
though.
double dipping, but I call it
No.
sort of two ways to approach it.
I'd say that it's early days, like he's starting this now, he's been spending R&M of $60,000 for 3 years. Another 5 years from now, he'll have a 10. You know, then he'll be getting into, you could debate his cap rate should be coming down. Right now, collectively looking at all the suites, I would still consider this building to be average or slightly below average at this point.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so I'm looking at suites 303 and 304 on your page number 5, and
Yeah.
I can see that basically by doing these improvements, his monthly rent $300. If you look at between the two, like it's $299
Yeah.
is the increase in that case. So what he's doing is an admirable thing, and he's actually improving the building, he's actually improving his investment
Yeah.
by putting more money into it. By putting more money into it in his investment though, that's not a deductible expense, that's something he has to capitalize. So we have, no, it is, so
Yeah,
we have to,
okay.
so we have to know how much he's
Yeah.
spending of his, if you want us to consider his remodeling costs and his improvement and actually upkeep.
Right.
We've got to know how much of that is going into his capital that he's gonna benefit from, because if he were
Yeah.
to sell that building right now, anybody buying would say, there's better suites here, it would improve the purchase price. But that's
Right.
something that would actually in some time increase the taxes on the building, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't give a right to lower them at this point.
Well, I think while he's going through the expenditure side of it, to me, and I don't know the case law like you
It's
guys
a capitalized
do.
expenditure.
Yeah.
Anything that he does to improve the building is
Yeah.
capitalized, it's something that he cannot consider any deduction ordinarily
Yeah.
from his an expense.
So
It's an investment.
when you take a beat, and this is for my own
Yes,
understanding, so if you take a beat up suite and is this repairs and maintenance when you replace these old components?
not replacement, repair
Yeah.
is deductible, but replacement
Yeah.
is something that you're making an improvement on, that you're gonna reap the benefits of in the future. It's an investment you're making that you're benefiting by, and that's something that you can't not normally deduct as an expense from the income that you receive.
So let me just belabor this one little more.
Yes.
So let's say you go into a suite and the cabinets are beat, the countertops chipped,
Yeah.
the flooring's stained, the bathroom's old. I can't repair those components, I have to replace them. So I don't think that should be amortized, I think that's normal R&M. When you go into a suite and you go, I can't fix those cabinets, I can't fix those countertops, they're chipped, the carpet's got a huge stain, I have to replace them.
Okay, well, that's your opinion, and you're entitled to it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Can we take a break, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we
or-
can.
Yeah,
So
let's take 5 minutes.
we'll take 10 minutes right now.
10?
Okay, we're gonna resume, and the next property on our list is 824 Arlington Street. Ms. Martins, when you're ready.
This is roll number 1303033100. 324 Arlington Street. The assessed value is $1,581,000. Its classification is 20. Liability status is taxable. This is an apartment building built in 1970 with 18 suites. On page 2, we have the income value summary. There are 3 bachelor units and 15 one-bedroom. with an average monthly rent per unit at $760.04. We have a vacancy rate of 2.6, expense rate at 49.57, and a cap rate at 5.1. That gives us our $1,581,000. On page 3, there are some rent comparables ranging from $735 to $800. There's cap rate information on page 4 and 5, municipal act information on page 6, and the mailer information on page 7 and 8, with 2 overhead shots on page 9 showing the location of the building on Arlington, a little bit north of Portage. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the assessor?
Just the same ones, you didn't have an opportunity to inspect this property, and your numbers are based on a model
Yes,
rather
they are.
than actual.
Mr. Chair, do you have any questions?
Well, it's very simple. The potential income on page 7, or the income on page 7 is 181 versus 164. We'll see what the appellate has to say, I guess. That's mostly a comment on the expense side. Doesn't seem to work out to the NOI, so I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, my only question is, I see that in this building, we have a 5.1% cap rate, and
Yes.
on other buildings of this vintage, in maybe even superior locations, we have a 5.3. I just wonder why the model choose a 5.1 for this one.
This may be, again, seeing that the expense rate is at the slightly lowered as well, this could be an issue with what the quality has been put on the property as far as what our parameters are that we're looking at. So it could be a higher quality
Okay.
of building?
Yeah, the model has a way of choosing that, is a mystery to us.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you can proceed with your evidence.
Unfortunately, I have a clerical mistake on the presentation I made.
Well, you can fix
here.
that verbally right now.
Okay, if we can refer to page 12, please, on my report.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to use this. So for gross income potential, it should be saying, gross income potential should say 170,425 plus 4475. Should read 174.9.
174.9, as opposed to 182,640.
I don't know where that came from, but, yeah, so, and then the vacancy loss stays the same at 4475. No, pardon me, I'm gonna change that to 4268.
4268?
That's a 2.6%.
Yeah, 2.6%, so 174.9 times 2.6% is 4548, and the new EGI, 174.9 minus 4548, the new EGI is 170,352. And the new expense allowance, my apologies for this, I thought I proofed these, but 96,580 by 77352. The new expense ratio it just comes up as 1. I think the rounding or something's off on this one. Try that one more time. The new expense ratio in mine is 56.69. The expense allowance doesn't change. And the NOI, 170,352 minus 96,580 is 73,772. And with that cap rate, my submission is now $1,312,000 instead of $1,309,000. Again, my apologies for this. I swear I checked these a number of times, and I guess I was, I don't know, blind to this one, but the new number is $1,312,000, and in this particular one, we do have a difference of opinion on gross income potential. Mine is based on actual, and I think will correlate with their submission, their property income and expense questionnaire. So mine comes in at 174,255 for effective gross income versus 159. So we do have a difference there, and the difference is not in vacancy rate, it's in actual rents versus modeled rents. So this was the actual rent roll rents that he is receiving versus the modeled rents. And I think in any circumstances, again, if we circle back to these, appraisals are to estimate the market value of a certain date. I can't imagine in any circumstance where actual numbers and an actual rent roll would not be preferred information over essentially what's an average rent roll that may or may not reconcile exactly with the property. So this is the exact income that he is earning, and anybody buying this property, you know, de facto market value is what this would sell for, would be looking at the actual rent rather than a model. So I think this evidence is better than a model formula. And the other difference is in the operating expenses, and as per a previous submission, I've used actual expenses except in 3 areas, and those are in property management, professional fees, and repairs and maintenance. So if I can refer you to page 13 on my submission, we can look at the property management over the last 3 years in the first column, and it's all over the place. It's 4712, 3401, and then 34,000 and change. That's been normalized to 5% of EGI, which I think is without dispute. Professional fees, again, you had nothing, then 7,500. We normalized that at 2,500, which I think is reasonable. And on the third column, we have repairs and maintenance. In 15, they were 18.1, in 16, 55.6, and in 17, 31.6. The mean average of those is 35,107, which is 1,950 per suite. We actually rolled that back a little bit based on our own models, if you will. We normalized that at 27,000, which if we double back to page 10, that repair and maintenance, which we rolled back to 27,000, is 1,500 per suite, which is kind of, in my view, on a building of this age and type, is absolute middle of the pack. So that takes us to an actual NOI of 73,772 corrected. Same cap rate arguments apply. The city's used a cap rate of 5.1%, which I believe in the Winnipeg marketplace is reserved for the best properties, the best located properties. We know that the range for a low-rise building in Winnipeg can range anywhere from 4 to 7.30%, according to the City of Winnipeg's own figures. So when I look at a property on Arlington, which is, you know, it's an okay neighborhood, it's an okay rental neighborhood, but it's entry-level renters. This is a property that's not going to get a big capital gain. Nobody's going to hit this one out of the park when they buy it and sell it in 10 years' time. It's a cash-on-cash model where you get a monetary return. You're not getting a big payday. Nobody's going to condo it 10 years from now. Nobody's going to make a big resale home run on this thing. It's a cash-on-cash investment. That's your return, and 5.1% is, in my mind, way too low for a property with these locational characteristics. So I think the cap rate which I use is defended by the sampling of cap rates I've included in the report. And to bounce you back again to page 10, we can see the sort of cap rates that I've compared it to. 512 Balmoral, 6.75%, and it's been built out in the same manner as this one. It's at 6.75%, and I would suggest it should be higher. It's an inferior location. Roke Street at 4.84% is severely under-rented, which has distorted that cap rate. 210 St. Mary's Road, 6.26. Langside, bad location, 6.12. Dugas, 5.38, and it's a brand-new building. This building, I was in this thing, didn't even have tenants yet. It was spanking new. Green, better location, 5.26. Beach Avenue, I was in that was only a couple of years old. It's at 5.35, better location, physically better, locationally better. And then Olive Street, which is actually, in fairness, Olive Street's a great comparison. It's better location, very similar building. I was in that one, appraised that one as well, 5.8%. So when I look at these cap rates, all buildings I've been in, Roke I was in 10 years ago, so I've been in every one of these buildings, and I've appraised every one of these buildings, and these cap rates suggest to me that our cap rate of 5.1 is not correct. So I've capitalized it at 5.5 to 5 3/4, which is, in my opinion, very reasonable. Exactly what somebody would do if they were buying this, though they might pick 5 3/4 and 6, but they would look at a range like that. We picked a number in the middle, which came out to 5.62%, which I think is much more reasonable than the 5.1%.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Martins?
There seems to be a big difference in what is in the income expense as far as the rental income and what you're reporting as the actual income. How can we reconcile that, the inconsistencies?
Well, I'm just going to catch up with you here. Well, the actual rent roll that I've included on page 5 of my submission, if we see the actual monthly rent, $14,343, and we extrapolate that up to a year, we're at $172,116, and the actual was $164, $169. So it doesn't reconcile perfectly. I suggest that may be a difference in vacancy, because I have included the same vacancy as you at 2.6%. In actuality, they may have suffered more vacancy. I'm just seeing if they split that out on their mailer. And it doesn't, they didn't split that out on their mailer. And I think, because the statement I have, and I was working from, was the actual, like a financial statement. And I think, as I look at this questionnaire, there may be just imprecision on the part of the applicant. He's got vacancy as 0, and his vacancy was not 0. So I think this is filled out by somebody who's probably not as, clearly not as competent as the accountant who provided me with real financial statements. So they don't reconcile perfectly, but I think we should go with the real statement rather than the questionnaire, which seems in error.
Thank you.
Ms. Terry, questions?
Yeah, on page 13. You normalized the repair and maintenance at $1,500 per suite. How did you do this? Because for 2017, the the actual cost on your chart is $1,758. In 2016, it's $3,086, and 15, it's $1,000. So, could you explain to me how you've come up with your 1,500? I know you said you've adjusted it, but I don't quite understand how you picked that figure.
Well, the mean average over the past 3 years is $35,107. So that's typically what they've spent on the building, which is $19.50 per suite. So that is the average of the last 3 years. I only used 1,500 because I thought 2016 was a little anomalous, 55,600. So I did roll that back a little bit. I think I could have defended normalizing that at a higher amount, but I essentially treated this like I do every market value appraisal, is that some get normalized higher and some get normalized lower. And I thought 1,500 per suite is less than the 3-year average, but in my view, appropriate to this property. Maybe it would be 1,500 if we had a 5-year average. But I've rolled it back rather than rolled it up, which is a little unusual. Which is a little unusual in this context. But I thought 1,500 is actually absolutely where this one belongs. And at 1,500, and with the cap rate I'm suggesting, it's still a significant reduction to the value, and I think is. To me, that points to the reasonableness of our position, that we could have staked out a $2,000 a suite R&M and supported it with past expenditures, and we didn't. So I think this speaks to that.
What's the condition of this building?
It is, I would call it average. I mean, it appeals to an entry-level renter. So it has no bells and whistles, everything. There's a lot of vinyl and a lot of cheap carpeting and a lot of cheap countertops. And it's very typical of a property of this type. There's some, things that need replacing, and this budget of $1,500 per suite per annum is reasonable. When you're competing in this particular strata, you don't want to spend $3,000 a suite because you're not getting that $1,200 tenant. You just want to keep it in the sweet spot that people will pay those rents and they're getting fair value. So the maintenance of $1,500 a suite is keeps it in that suite.
Except the evidence does not show that. The evidence shows 3,088 in 2016 and 1,758 in 2017. So you're saying to maintain the rents where they should be and so on, and then we talked about the cap rate, obviously, we know how that works. So I've got, what I'm saying, basically, my impression is you pick $1,500 because you figure it's reasonable, but there's no real evidence for us
Well, it's,
to deal with it because it's all over the place.
Well, it is, and that's why we have to normalize a figure like that rather than just use a 1-year number. So we try to normalize it based on a longer projection period than that. So if we do bounce back to page, I don't have the full one. Oh, here we are, pardon me, page 13. So, again,
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, so you're in column 3.
Yeah,
And you're seeing how the R&M's all over the place?
yeah.
And that's what
That's where we're at.
normalizing is trying to deal with. Like if I had used the actual for 017, I don't think that specific snapshot in time is the way the industry works. I think anybody buying this property again would look at the last 3 years, 18, 55, and 31, and he would normalize it, or she would normalize it at 27, which is close to, well, it's
$1,500.
It's $1,500 a
Yeah.
suite. There's been a year where he's been lower, there's been a year where he's been much higher, and there's been a year where he's been a little bit higher. So,
Okay, I'm just trying to get a little more
no,
information
I-
on where you're coming from.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically where Mr. Terrian previously saying was that By normalizing, you're really modeling, just like the city models.
Yes, and there's 3 areas where I model.
Yeah,
Those
that's
3
fine, okay,
specific
that's a
ones.
comment, not an, okay.
Yeah,
Now, the city also models a vacancy factor,
yes,
and I guess you'd agree with me that a building that has normalized rents will have a normalized vacancy factor in most cases because of the fact that
Yes.
it'll be spread, there's no real incentive to go into that building because,
yeah,
you know, why go into that building? Because there's other rents that might be cheaper somewhere else, and a building that has lower rents is gonna, in most cases, everything else being equal, have no vacancies or a very, very low vacancy factor. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay. And so if you use the city's model, which factors in a vacancy factor, and then use an NOI, which takes into account lower rents, but you
Right.
take the vacancy factor, you're basically double dipping. Would you agree with that? Because what you're doing is you're taking
Yeah.
the city's vacancy factor allowance, but there's the building that has lower rents doesn't have vacancies.
Right,
So in effect, you're saying, I'm taking the good things in the model, but I want to use the normalized rents which
Yeah.
aren't in the model.
I absolutely understand what you're saying, and the only thing I would suggest is that vacancy occurs as turnover as well.
No,
These
I-
are very
No,
transient,
I understand that.
you know, they're low income, transient renters, and even though you keep it full, there are vacancies because Joe left and Jane moved in.
Sure.
And there's a, so it's almost impossible to price the rent so low that you won't have vacancy.
No,
It's just the practical running of the property.
No, I understand that, but I'm trying to look at this building in itself, and I
Yeah.
noticed when you haven't really shown us a reason for vacancies here, there might not be
Yeah.
any, for all we know.
Yeah,
But if you.
I believe that to be impossible.
But you're happy to take the 2.7% vacancy factor in the model, and then use the NOI that you have.
Yes,
Now, the second thing that I'm pointing out is that I look at your page number 5, or is it number, yeah, it is number 5. And I see that actually, in this case, they are actually rebating
right,
rent to tenants.
Yeah.
And they have a lower rent, and that's what you're using in your NOI.
yes.
But in fact, I think, isn't this the case where the municipal board has said we're not allowed to consider
Yeah.
rebates, which we're not?
I don't agree with applying that decision to this sort of a property. This is an entirely different beast. This scheduled rent is maintained high, just so that when to justify.
Yeah, I can answer that. I've seen
Yeah.
a number of board decisions.
Yeah.
And the board decisions are pretty consistent, that this type of rebate is not allowed to be considered.
I,
I can tell you that.
on an apartment building,
Yes.
yeah, we'll have to agree to disagree on that.
Okay.
I
Well,
can't
I'm-
understand why anybody,
I'm
I mean,
just telling you-
believe me,
I'm not
if he
saying that-
could get that rent, he'd take it.
I'm not saying agree or disagree, I'm telling you
Yeah.
what the municipal board is basically.
Yeah, I believe that'll ultimately be challenged and overturned by somebody, but believe me, if you look at Suite 101, if this guy could get the 926 schedule, he'd be very happy to take it. He can, but he doesn't wanna unregister it.
Yeah.
He keeps the registered amount and then takes what he can get.
No, I-
What he can get's 827.
Okay, and let's suppose that we were even to agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, and see if we keep the building reasonably full because of the fact that he's charging lower rents than market because he's getting rebates.
Right,
Then should you be entitled to the vacancy factor that's in the model?
yeah, I know what you're saying, and I think, again, I'm gonna circle back to that there is vacancy just because these aren't like blocks where people stay there 10 years. These are blocks where they stay there,
I
there's
know.
a constant.
But what percent of vacancies should we use then? We don't know what it is.
Well, I think the 2.6 is reasonable. That's, I mean, I know what you're saying about the model.
Yeah, but you're also taking a lower NOI,
Yeah.
and you're basically, you know, so what I'm
But
saying.
I would challenge, or I would suggest that the rents that I'm using are market rents. So they're not lower than market, so I'm using market rents and I'm using market vacancy rate, which I think is consistent.
Okay, well, you know, we're going in circles, and I don't think we're, you know, but I think we have certainly, we do agree essentially.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's a relatively low
Yeah.
amount, 2.6%.
Yeah. Okay.
One more to go?
Yeah, we now have one at 641 Stafford Street. And I see we have the same owner as on Hanson Highway, Mr. Teresa.
Yes.
When you're ready, Ms. Collins.
Thank you. This is roll number 120113802000. The assessed value is $4,454,000. The classification is 20. Liability status is taxable. This is an apartment building built in 1965 with an effective year built at 1970. The number of suites is 44. And if you look on page 2, we'll see that there are 32 one-bedroom suites and 12 two-bedroom suites with an average monthly rent of $897.78. This one has a vacancy rate at 1.8% and an expense rate at 49.29% with a cap rate of 5.3%, which gives us the $4,454,000. On page 3, we have some comparable rents ranging from $813 to $1,028. Page 4 and 5 is the cap rate information, with page 6 being the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts, with page 7 and 8 being the income information that was submitted to the department. And page 9 shows a couple overhead views showing that this property is on the corner of Stafford and Taylor. And that's everything, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the assessor?
Just the same too, you weren't able to inspect the property and it's based on modeling rather than actual.
No, I wasn't, and yes, yes.
And this property, again, I find myself.
Oh, hang on, we're asking questions.
Oh, I'm
now.
sorry.
That's not a problem. If you have any other questions, you can ask them, otherwise.
No, I'm done.
Okay, do you have any questions, Mr. Terry?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I don't either, you can go ahead now.
Oh, okay. Again, this is one where I agree essentially with the city's position. I used actual income, which actually is higher than the city's. If you refer to page 7 on my report, part of that is due to I've included ancillary income like parking and laundry into my numbers, so they don't reconcile exactly with the city's number, which you see in the first line I put gross income potential, all sources. That's not really true on the city's number, that's suite rentals. But at any rate, the effective gross income, once I add in the ancillary income, is actually higher than the city's effective gross income. So there's no argument to be had there. We're essentially on the same page on the income side of the ledger. On the expense side, a little bit of a broken record. We have used actual expenses rather than modeled expenses, except in 3 categories where we have normalized the expense. And those 3 categories again are property management, professional fees, and R&M. And if we circle back to page 5 in my report, 2017 actual on there, and on the repairs and maintenance. Okay, let's go property management. I'm jumping ahead of myself here a little bit. Property management, we see in 015 was 10,003, 016, 81. 2017, they have property management of 41,458. We have normalized that down to 23,931, which is higher than normal, 8.66%, and that was not explained in my brief here, but apparently I have felt that this needs a little more higher management based on that. 017 was 41,500. So I can't understand why that number, that is their number, and I should have footnoted it, but I have no explanation for it. I've normalized it at 23,000. I've cut it back to what is essentially a statistical 3-year average. The professional fees, again, hard to explain how they had none in 15, none in 16, and none in 17. 18.4 in 17, pardon me. normalize that at 5,000, which is fairly typical for a building like this. And again, I think, and I know this customer, and I think their mailers are, they get the right answer, but they're a little bit, I don't know, clumsy with how they put it in the different categories. The repairs and maintenance budget has been 61,000 in 2015, 100,000 and change in 16, and 82,000 in 17. When I normalized this one, I just went with the actual on 2017, saying that essentially based on 15 and 16, 17 was a pretty normal year for maintenance at 82,000. So I did use the actual there, thinking that the actual is reasonably representative of the 3 years average. So let's go with the actual, which turns out to be $1,870 per suite. But that's fairly high. But the rents are fairly high in this building, and it's an older building, and you've got to keep it up to keep that income up. So I think 1870s right where a building like this should be. So the actual, and in this particular instance, the actual expenses have really only been adjusted in 2 areas. One for professional fees, and one for property management. So anyway, and then we're back to the cap rate argument, which is, again, I think the cap rate is too low. The city's one has been at 5.3%, and mine's at 5.62%. And if I can refer you to my tabled comparable sales, or cap rates, I would suggest looking at that there, you can reconcile those with my estimate better than you can reconcile them with the city's numbers. So I think this one, again, the focus of the difference is just an R&M expense versus the city's model and in cap rates. So, and I think in both those instances, our rates are more reasonable.
Thank you. Questions, Ms. Martins?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Terry, any questions?
Well, looking at your page 5, and you've got management at 8.66%, and usually we're using a 5% rate. Now, the moment we do that, even the city's NOI it's a little higher than yours, but I'm not sure of the difference between 3.66 and 41. I can work that out pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
But I would, if we brought this back to 5%, the 236,053 NOI of the city is pretty darn good. It's just
Yeah.
that you move the management fee, and we usually don't move that.
Do you mind if I, just one moment, I'm just gonna catch up with your comment. I wanna fracture that out at 5% and just see
Okay.
the implications of that. So it's about an
Yeah.
$18,000, and on the NOI, yeah, no, I can't disagree with you.
No. You see, that's where I
Yeah.
figured the 236 of the city versus your NOI of 224.
Mm-hmm.
The city was even giving you a break there in the sense of the NOI. So then
Yeah.
I'm looking at this, then I go back and concentrate on the cap rate,
Right,
which is really where I'm
Yeah.
looking at the moment. based on what I've just asked you.
And
So
I,
this is a 19, just let me make sure I get my, because this is 1965 building, but it must have been upgraded in 1970, because it's a 1970 building. Do we know what was done to that building in 1970?
Or to make it
No.
1970, no.
no, I don't know what was done to it in 1970. I know it got new windows about 15 years ago, but other than that, it's, you know, there's a lot of original components on that building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wooden steel frame building, right? That's what it
No,
says.
I believe it's a masonry building. I made myself copies of the report you guys have, but I just took the valuation section, so I don't have the summary section.
Because
But
I
believe it's masonry.
Well, the city's at page 1, if I'm on the right place. I think I am.
Yes.
It says wooden steel framed exterior walls.
Do you
So
mind if I have a
you're-
look at a full copy of my report? Is there one that I could have because there's usually a summary section at the front.
I'm just trying to
Yeah,
just get my mooring straight here, because when I look at this on the cap rate side,
thank you.
and I would have liked to know what was done then, and I know that's a fair question, but
I'm calling it masonry concrete block, but that was, I mean, there's so many, it's hard to tell.
okay.
I mean, it's got a face brick on it, which I
Okay.
assumed had a concrete block backup, but
Okay, so you've got different evidence, that's it.
yeah.
Okay,
But,
what else? And then your cap rate, you were between 5.5 and 5.75 on this one on page 6,
Yeah,
but you averaged it at 5.62, is that correct?
that's correct, and just to circle back to your point about the NOI, I think I will concede the NOI to the city. I mean, obviously, if you won't entertain the actual, this guy submitted actual management fees of 8.66, and I used his figures. I can't explain why that would be above norm, but even if we concede that position, now we're arguing the cap rate, I guess, is essentially all we're
Yeah,
left
well,
with.
the reason I raised that is that,
Yeah.
just give you an idea how we approach these things, and
Yes.
normally we try to look at the bottom line too, like
Yeah.
what's the value? I
Oh,
mean, that's very
absolutely.
important.
Yeah.
But we're all looking at all these different things to try and get a better understanding.
Yeah, I know, I understand what you're
Okay,
saying.
thank you.
I think the cap rate, again, we're back to that, and most mainstream suburban apartment buildings reconstructed in the same manner that this one's been reconstructed are exhibiting cap rates 5.5 to 5 3/4. And the ones that I have appended to my report, again, I've looked at every one of them. I've weighed the relative advantages and disadvantages of them vis-a-vis this one. And I think any investor looking at this property and this income stream would be right in between 5.5, 5 3/4. I picked right in the middle at 5.62. And I think that's a defensible position, and it's better than a model position because all my cap rates, I know how I reconstructed them. They're all reconstructed in the same manner, and I don't use other people's cap rates, I use my own cap rates, because I know how each one of them is done. Because the cap rates are opinions, because even, you know, you might look at the same building and normalize something different, so that there can be inconsistencies between cap rates. But in the ones that I've presented here, there's no inconsistency. They've been reconstructed in the exact same way, and I think they're really reliable, and they reliably put the cap rate on this one between 5.5 and 5 3/4.
Okay, that's good, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. So, the first thing I look at is the front page of the city's report that indicates the building was built in 1965, but has an effective year of 1970, meaning that
Yeah.
significant upgrades have been done to make it overall 5 years younger.
Yeah.
And I know that, because you were here this morning before another one of Mr. Dreamer's buildings, where
Right.
he was improving suites
Right.
on an annual basis, so you didn't have in this building.
I don't think so. I think to have that discussion again, he's improving things where he has to keep his tenant base.
No.
And more so on a building like this where you have higher rents.
I know, but I'm
higher
just to know if
expectations.
any of your expenses for repairs and maintenance
Yeah.
are actually capital expenses.
In my opinion, none.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you didn't give us a rent roll on this one, the other one you did, so I
Yeah.
can't see if rents are differing from one suite to another to
Right.
see if any suites have in fact been upgraded.
Yeah, and actually, the only thing I say in that regard is I think I present a range. Yeah, so some have been upgraded, you're right. The 32 one-bedroom units in the subject building range in monthly actual rent after rebates from $756 to $1,007 per month.
Yes.
But, you know, again, I don't think that R&M, when you have to be replacing component parts, I don't think that's amortized stuff.
Well, it depends what you're doing. If it's
Yeah.
a thing that goes to the capital and improves the building, improves the value of it, so it's something you get on a sale, because the
Yeah.
purchaser would buy that improved unit, so you're making basically a Ford into a Cadillac.
Yes.
You know, is something that you don't get to deduct, it's something that you've
Yeah.
actually added to, because you've got a benefit
Yeah.
in having a more valuable building, so.
Definitely
so
none of
again,
that going
in that
on.
case, you can't deduct it from your cost, because it's an improvement that you're making that is improving your investment. Is that-
I would put this, and for that matter, that other one we discussed,
Yes.
as your typical R&M, where things get to that beat-up stage where you have to replace short-life component parts, and you do.
Wow.
So it's normal maintenance, in my opinion.
Okay, well, it depends what he's doing, and we don't know. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think this sums everything up. Thank you very much for your presentations, they were delightful,
Thank you.
I can tell you.
Very good.
And we appreciate it, because they were very well done by all parties, assessor and yourselves. So thank you.
Well, that was an interesting experience, as I was saying, it was my first time here, and it's very
Oh, that's
interesting.
okay.
so
Well,
thank
hope to see you again.
That's
Yeah, I
okay.
hope so, thank you.
Our job is to try to be fair, that's all.
Yep.